The Jaguar stood at the creek fork because water behaved differently when it had options. The creek split cleanly around a low gravel bar where roots stitched the bank together just enough to resist erosion. One branch ran narrow and fast, its channel pinched between clay walls and fallen timber. The other spread wider and slower, bending outward into a shallow sweep where the forest leaned close and shadows pooled early. From above, the fork looked balanced. From the Jaguar's eyes, it was not. He stood with his forepaws on damp sand, hind legs braced higher on firm ground, body aligned square to the split. His coat, golden with heavy black rosettes, absorbed the low light beneath the canopy. Water noise filled the space without dominating it, a constant layered sound that hid small movements and exaggerated large ones. The current pulled wide to the right. That mattered. The Jaguar did not drink. He did not crouch. He waited. Waiting here was not stillness. It was measurement. The narrow channel carried sound forward sharply. Any movement upstream would arrive clean and fast, unbroken by bank or bend. The wider branch behaved differently. Sound spread and softened, broken by roots and overhanging leaves. Scent lifted unevenly, caught in slow eddies where air and water argued about direction. The Jaguar turned his head slightly, ears forward, then rotated one ear backward to listen to the forest behind him. Nothing followed. That was unusual. Creek forks concentrated movement. Animals approached water along predictable lines, then hesitated at the split. Hooves tested footing, small bodies committed too early. Fish shifted position when current changed speed. Everything revealed something at a fork. The Jaguar shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, claws extending just enough to anchor into damp sand. His tail lay loose behind him, tip resting against a root that transmitted vibration up his spine. Below the surface, something moved. Not fish. Too deliberate. A capybara surfaced briefly in the wider channel, nose breaking water just long enough to breathe before slipping back under. Ripples spread outward, slower than they should have been. The current pulled wide. The Jaguar watched the water instead of the animal. Wide pull meant depth without speed. It meant bodies could move silently beneath the surface longer than expected. It meant escape routes curved rather than ran straight. That changed the hunt. He stepped down into the fork. Water closed around his forelegs, cool and heavy, pressing against muscle. He placed each paw carefully, choosing spots where gravel resisted shift. His movement created almost no disturbance, just a slight darkening where sediment lifted and settled again. The Jaguar moved toward the wider channel. He did not rush. Capybara fled best in straight water. They relied on momentum and group panic. Here, the wide branch favored those who knew where depth changed suddenly. The Jaguar knew this place. He had crossed here before in another season, when rain had swollen the creek and erased the gravel bar entirely. Memory mattered, but only if confirmed by present conditions. He paused again. The waterline trembled faintly ahead of him. The capybara surfaced farther downstream now, closer to the bank, its body half exposed as it tested footing. It hesitated, deciding whether to climb out or stay submerged. The Jaguar moved. He did not leap. He surged. Water parted around his chest as he drove forward, muscles releasing in a single controlled burst. The capybara reacted instantly, churning water and turning toward deeper flow. Too late. The Jaguar closed the distance in 2 strides, jaws locking behind the skull with crushing precision. The struggle was brief and violent, contained mostly underwater where sound vanished. The current pulled wide around them, carrying ripples away instead of back. Within seconds, it was over. The Jaguar dragged the body toward the gravel bar, choosing a spot where roots broke sightlines from both channels. He paused only long enough to scan the forest, ears rotating, eyes lifting toward movement that did not come. No alarm calls, no human sound, just water continuing its argument with the banks. He fed quickly, efficiently, tearing and swallowing with practiced economy. Blood darkened the sand and vanished as the current claimed it. Insects gathered almost immediately, drawn by scent the water could not erase. Far away, a motor sounded briefly, boat or generator, then faded. The Jaguar did not react. Distance here was not immediate danger, it was timing. He finished and dragged what remained into cover, wedging it between roots where water could not carry the scent as easily. Then he returned to the fork and stood there again. The light shifted. Late afternoon slid toward evening, cooling the forest and thickening shadow. The narrow channel sharpened its voice as temperature dropped. The wider channel slowed further, surface smoothing into dark glass broken only by drifting leaves. The current still pulled wide. The Jaguar stood with his paws in the water, body relaxed now, breathing even. He did not linger because he was satisfied. He lingered because places like this rewrote themselves quietly. When rain returned upstream, the wide channel would deepen first. When drought came, it would hold water longer. When people walked the banks, they chose the narrow side and avoided mud. The fork remembered all of that. So did he. When he finally turned away, moving into denser forest where ground rose and water sound faded, the creek continued to split and rejoin itself without concern. The current pulled wide, and for an animal that survived by knowing not just where water went, but how it chose to go there, that knowledge mattered more than the kill itself. Night did not arrive cleanly at the creek fork. It slid in under the canopy in layers, first cooling the air, then changing the sound of water, then finally taking the colour out of everything except movement. The Jaguar returned after dark, stepping down the same path he had used earlier, but moving more slowly now, letting the creek tell him what had changed. It always changed. Rain had fallen upstream. Not much, just enough to matter. The narrow channel had answered first. Its voice was sharper now, faster, water climbing the clay walls by a few centimetres, scraping loose leaves and carrying them downstream in tight, hurried lines. The wide channel answered differently. It did not rise quickly, it spread. Water slid outward into the shallows, filling spaces between roots and stones that had been dry hours before. The edge softened. Firm sand turned uncertain. Reflections thickened, hiding depth and angle. The current pulled wide again, but wider than before. The Jaguar stopped at the bank and watched. This was the hour when crossings failed. Animals remembered where footing had been solid earlier in the day and stepped there again without testing. Hooves slipped, smaller bodies stalled. Panic replaced direction. The Jaguar never trusted memory alone. He lowered one forepaw and pressed gently into the margin. The ground gave slightly. Not collapse, just concession. He withdrew the paw and shifted 2 steps downstream where gravel still held shape. Only then did he step into the water. Night amplified the fork's deception. The narrow channel looked dangerous now, fast, loud, committed. The wide channel looked calm, almost still, its surface smooth enough to reflect fragments of stars through gaps in the canopy. That calm was false. Underneath, water moved laterally, not forward, dragging at legs instead of pushing past them. Balance failed sideways here, not backward. The Jaguar angled his body against it instinctively, shoulders turning just enough to let the pull slide along muscle instead of catching him broadside. He crossed only part way and stopped. Listening. Above the water's constant voice, something else moved. A low splash. Then another. Peccary. A small group approached from upstream, moving cautiously, grunting softly to one another. They paused at the fork exactly where animals always paused, confused by choice, scent, and sound all arriving at once. The Jaguar sank lower into the water, letting it close over his legs and belly. His body became part of the creek's broken shape, rosettes dissolving into reflection and shadow. The peccaries hesitated. One stepped forward, tested the wide channel, and recoiled as the ground slid beneath it. Another chose the narrow branch, only to balk at speed and noise. Indecision stretched. The Jaguar waited. The lead peccary committed suddenly to the wide channel, splashing forward in a burst of urgency. The others followed, panic replacing caution, bodies churning water and erasing subtlety. The Jaguar moved. He did not charge into the group. He intercepted the first animal that lost footing. One step, then another, then a powerful sideways surge that used the current instead of fighting it. His jaws closed low on the neck, twisting with the pull of water rather than against it. The kill was fast. The rest of the group scattered immediately, choosing speed over cohesion, vanishing into forest on both banks without looking back. Water swallowed the sound again. The Jaguar dragged the carcass only a short distance, enough to wedge it against a root cluster where the wide channel slowed and sediment built naturally. He fed there in the dark, unseen, the creek carrying scent downstream in broken fragments that meant little without context. As he ate, rain intensified upstream. Not heavy yet, but persistent. The fork responded in real time. The narrow channel rose visibly now, biting into its banks. The wide channel expanded further, creeping into forest floor, claiming paths and footprints alike. The Jaguar finished and stepped back onto higher ground. This place was finished for the night. He climbed the bank slowly, muscles heavy but controlled, and paused once more to look down at the fork. It no longer resembled what it had been hours earlier. The gravel bar had shrunk. The distinction between channels blurred. Choice was dissolving. That was always the final stage. When water removed options, it stopped offering advantage. The Jaguar turned away and moved into higher forest where the ground sloped upward and water noise thinned into background. Behind him, the creek continued to spread, rewrite, and forget. The current still pulled wide, but soon it would pull everywhere, and the Jaguar, having taken what the fork could give before it lost its shape, carried that knowledge forward, leaving the water to finish its work without him. Morning did not restore the creek fork. It simplified it. The Jaguar returned at first light, moving along higher ground where roots broke the soil into reliable steps. Rain had continued through the night upstream, steady enough to matter, patient enough to change things without violence. The forest smelled washed and unsettled, as if familiar paths had been loosened rather than erased. From above, the fork no longer looked like a decision. It looked like a widening. The gravel bar that once split the creek had thinned, its edges shaved smooth by hours of lateral pull. What had been two distinct channels now bled into one another, water sliding across low points and ignoring the lines it had followed the day before. The current no longer chose, it occupied. The Jaguar stopped at the bank and watched. This was the moment when places lost usefulness, not because they became dangerous, but because they became predictable. When water spread evenly, it stopped creating hesitation. Animals crossed where they could, not where they had to decide. Forks mattered only while they forced choice. The Jaguar stepped closer, testing ground that had been firm yesterday. It yielded immediately, not collapsing, just no longer offering resistance. Sand slipped, roots softened, the margin between land and water blurred until it meant nothing at all. The waterline breathed outward and inward as pressure shifted upstream. He did not enter. There was nothing left to enter for. The wide pull that had once curved movement into mistake now stretched everywhere. Sound behaved the same in all directions. Scent flattened and moved without pattern. Depth hid itself evenly. The place had stopped telling secrets. Across the creek, movement appeared. A lone deer, young, light-bodied, approached cautiously, nose low, ears rotating. It paused where animals always paused, then stepped forward without hesitation, crossing through shallow water that reached only to its knees. It did not slip, it did not panic, it crossed cleanly and disappeared into forest on the opposite bank. The Jaguar watched without tension. The fork no longer favoured him. That was not failure. It was conclusion. He turned away before the sun rose fully, moving upslope where water noise thinned and ground regained definition. Here, paths still mattered. Here, shade behaved honestly. Here, memory could be trusted again. Behind him, the creek continued to spread, smoothing its edges, forgetting the shape it had offered only hours before. By afternoon, no animal would pause there. By evening, the banks would look as though they had never argued at all. The fork would exist only as a suggestion, visible to those who remembered it, meaningless to those who did not. The Jaguar did not look back. He had taken what the place could give while it still demanded attention. That was always the rule. Places that force choice are temporary. Places that stop forcing it are finished. The current had pulled wide, then wider, then everywhere. And when the water stopped choosing, the Jaguar had already moved on, carrying forward not the memory of the kill, but the understanding of exactly when a place stopped being worth waiting in.